The blue line of fate. Michael Carter's earliest memories were of sirens wailing through the streets of his neighborhood, their echoes bouncing off the crumbling brick buildings. He grew up in Southside, a place where dreams were often cut short, where single mothers worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and where young boys like him had to make a choice, fall into the streets or fight to rise above them. His mother, Angela Carter, was his rock. She worked endless shifts as a nurse, coming home exhausted but still managing to make dinner and help him with his schoolwork. She never spoke of his father, who had left when Michael was only 5 years old. All Michael knew was that he had a duty to be the man of the house, to protect his mother, and to build a future she could be proud of. One evening, when Michael was 10, he witnessed an event that would shape the rest of his life. He had been walking home from school when he saw a group of older boys arguing outside a corner store. The argument escalated, and before Michael could react, a gunshot rang out. A man collapsed onto the pavement, clutching his chest as blood pooled beneath him. The shooter ran, disappearing down an alley, leaving behind a scene that would haunt Michael for years. Frozen in shock, he felt a firm but gentle hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw a tall police officer kneeling beside him. The man's name tag read Harris. His deep brown eyes held something Michael hadn't expected. Concern, not just for the victim, but for him. "You okay, kid?" Harris asked, his voice steady but kind. Michael nodded, but he wasn't okay. His heart pounded and tears pricked his eyes. "This isn't your fault," Harris continued. "But what you saw, it's real. And it's why I do what I do. To stop this from happening. To protect people like you." Michael didn't respond, but the words stayed with him. That night, he lay awake in bed, replaying the scene in his mind. For the first time, he understood what it meant to want to make a difference. As Michael grew older, the pull of the streets was strong. Many of his childhood friends had turned to gangs or dropped out of school. The temptation was there, quick money, a sense of belonging, but his mother's sacrifices and Officer Harris's words kept him grounded. He focused on school, pushing himself harder with each passing year. In high school, he joined the Junior Police Academy, a program designed to mentor at-risk youth. Harris, now a detective, took a special interest in him, guiding him through the program. Through training exercises and ride-alongs, Michael saw the reality of policing, the good and the bad. He learned that the job wasn't just about arresting criminals. It was about helping people, building trust, and sometimes making tough choices. By the time he graduated, there was no doubt in his mind. He would become a police officer. The academy was grueling, pushing Michael to his limits, both physically and mentally. He struggled at first, doubting whether he had what it took. But every time he felt like quitting, he thought of his mother, of Harris, and of that man bleeding out on the sidewalk. He couldn't turn his back now. When he finally graduated, badge in hand, he saw his mother in the crowd, tears streaming down her face. He had done it, not just for himself, but for her. His first days as an officer were a whirlwind. The streets he had once walked as a boy were now his responsibility. He quickly learned that not everyone saw the police as protectors. Some feared him, some resented him, and some, like his old friend Jamal, simply didn't understand. Jamal had been his best friend growing up, but their paths had diverged. While Michael was in the academy, Jamal had been caught up in the cycle of crime, doing what he had to do to survive. One evening, Michael and his partner responded to a robbery call at a liquor store. When they arrived, Michael's heart sank. Jamal was standing behind the counter, a gun in his shaking hands. Their eyes met. A lifetime of memories flashed between them. "Put it down, Jamal," Michael pleaded, stepping forward. His partner raised his weapon, but Michael held out a hand to stop him. "Mike, I ain't got a choice, man," Jamal whispered. His voice was thick with desperation. "Yes, you do. Right now, you do." For a moment it seemed like Jamal might listen. His grip on the gun loosened, but then sirens blared outside. Panic overtook his features and he made a move. Too fast, too sudden. A shot rang out. Jamal fell. Michael ran to him, pressing his hands against the wound, but the blood wouldn't stop. Jamal looked up at him, fear and regret in his eyes. "I should have listened," he whispered before his breath hitched and stopped. That night, Michael sat in his patrol car, staring at his shaking hands. He had done everything he could, but it hadn't been enough. He thought of quitting, of walking away. But then he remembered Harris's words from so many years ago. "This isn't your fault." Michael knew that the job wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying to do better, to be better, to give people like Jamal a chance before it was too late. And so he continued. Through every shift, every call, every difficult moment, Michael carried the weight of his past and the hope for the future. He had chosen his path not because it was easy, but because it was right. And in the end, that was enough. But his journey was far from over. As the months went by, Michael found himself drawn deeper into the community, working not just as an officer, but as a mentor to the kids who reminded him of his younger self. He started outreach programs, organizing sports events and after-school activities to keep youth away from crime. He became a symbol of hope for those who believed their paths were already written. However, not everyone welcomed his efforts. Corruption, systemic issues, and resistance from within the department tested his resolve. Would he continue to fight for change from within, or would he be forced to walk away from the badge he had worked so hard to earn?